One of the reasons we're here tonight is because we have been trying over the last 18 months to get some of our colleagues on the other side to join us in job creation strategies. We had almost no senators here, I guess at the time just 3 on the other side, join our side to pass the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. That legislation, which we passed in the early part of 2009, has created, one estimate, I think it's rather conservative, but it created about 3 million jobs. But in an economy where we've lost 8, we've got to keep going and put in place other strategies. We passed the HIRE Act not too long ago, but I think when you pass a lot of legislation, it goes right by people. But that HIRE Act provided a payroll tax holiday, or payroll tax credit, I should say, for the hiring of an individual who's been unemployed for 60 or more days. That's created a number of jobs. We just passed a bill that the President signed into law today, the Small Business Jobs and Credit Act, a direct infusion to small businesses across the United States of America. $12 billion in tax breaks directly to small business. In addition to that, a loan fund for our smaller banks, our community banks, to provide most of the capital to most of the businesses in America, because we know that small businesses create most of the jobs. So we've been taking step after step. None of it is perfect. Not one bill will lead to a full recovery. But we've been trying to push this economy. The image of kind of coming out of the ditch that we've all used, I think, is a good analogy. One bill isn't, one push, one bill isn't enough to get this economy fully recovered. But we've been making progress. And today we come together once again to try something we've advocated before, to try to take some steps to stop the offshoring of jobs, the shipping of jobs overseas, because we have the wrong tax policies in place. And what does this bill do? What is the Creating American Jobs and Ending Offshoring Act do? Well, basically 3 things, not tremendously complicated for those who are running businesses, but critically important to our jobs, our families, and our future. Number 1, it would create a payroll tax holiday for companies that return jobs to the United States from overseas. What happens there is we'd be providing relief from the employer's share of the Social Security payroll tax on wages paid to new U.S. employees performing services in the United States. It's as simple as that. We should have done it a long time ago. We could have taken these steps before, but our friends on the other side have, just like they've blocked almost every job creation bill I can think of the last 18 months, they've blocked this over and over again. Second, this bill would end subsidies for plant closing costs. As some of my colleagues have noted, the bill would prohibit a firm from taking any deduction, loss, or credit for amounts paid in connection with reducing or ending the operation of a trade or business in the United States, starting or expanding a similar trade or business overseas. We've made it easier, or we've created incentives to ship jobs overseas, instead of creating disincentives for companies to send jobs overseas. So it would end that basic policy that ships jobs overseas. And thirdly, we would end tax breaks for runaway plants that go overseas and have no penalty applied to moving jobs overseas instead of keeping jobs in America. And I mentioned before the HIRE Act, that legislation that provided a payroll tax credit for the hiring of an individual who's been unemployed for 60 more days. What we're doing here is really building on that policy. I want to commend our Majority Leader, Senator Reid, Senator Durbin, the presiding officer tonight, and Senator Schumer and others, not just in our leadership but beyond, for building upon what we did in the HIRE Act earlier this year and introducing this bill to provide employer relief from the employer's share of the Social Security payroll tax on wages paid to a new U.S. employee performing services here. In other words, we're trying to bring jobs back to the United States. We're not saying this bill is a magic wand that solves all of our economic problems. One bill is not a recovery, but it's another forward step in furtherance of that objective to lift this economy completely and completely out of the ditch that it's been in for far too long. We know this didn't happen overnight. We know our economy didn't fall into a ditch overnight. We also know that the loss of manufacturing jobs didn't just occur over the last several years. It occurred over many years. But if you just look at the last 9 or 10 years, I know, for example, in Pennsylvania, we lost over 200,000 jobs. The best estimate is 207,000 jobs just in Pennsylvania lost that are categorized as manufacturing jobs. In some states, it's a lot higher than that. My colleague from Michigan, Senator Stabenow, was remarking earlier that Michigan had lost over 1 million jobs in that time period, just on manufacturing jobs. We know that the unemployment rate across the country is intolerably too high. In our state, fortunately, it's below 10. A lot of states can't say that. But 9.3 or 9.5 roughly in Pennsylvania over many months, that equates to almost 600,000 people. It got as high as 592,000 people out of work. Now we're down a little bit, but only down as far as 585,000 people out of work. I went across Pennsylvania in the latter part of the summer. In about 4 weeks, I was in some 31 counties, most of them small and rural counties, most of them counties that have a lot of small towns in them and a lot of geography, a lot of space. But in our state, whether you go to a small county like Potter County, which has less than 20,000 people in it and is almost 100% rural, their unemployment rate is about 11.5%. Philadelphia, the biggest city in our state, the biggest county as well, has an unemployment rate of 12% now. More than 75,000 people out of work in the city of Philadelphia. So whether you go to a small town or a rural community, or whether you go to the biggest city in our state, the unemployment rate is far, far too high. So it's my obligation to not just say, well, the Recovery Act created 3 million jobs, may not have been perfect, might not be popular, but it created a lot of jobs. But that's not enough. That's why we supported the HIRE Act. That's why we supported the Small Business Jobs and Credit Act. The community bankers, by the way, now this isn't a number from a Democratic office. The community bankers tell us the Small Business Jobs and Credit Act will create 500,000 jobs. What if they're off by a big number? What if it's only 400,000? My goodness. If we could pass any bill that would create 400,000 jobs, that would be remarkable. And if they're right, it'll be more than that. It'll be 500,000 jobs. So we're pushing and pushing and pushing to move this economy fully out of the ditch, to have a full and robust recovery. Because we know what happens when the economy recovers. We saw it in the late 1990s during President Clinton's term of office, 2 terms of office. We saw that because we had not only recovery, but then tremendous growth, that we were investing in priorities like healthcare and education, in the skills of our workers for the future and for a stronger economy. We had not only eliminated the deficit, the Congress and the President at the time, not only eliminated the deficit, the surplus was $236 billion when President Clinton left office. He handed that to President Bush. When President Bush handed over the keys to the White House, so to speak, to President Obama, 236 in surplus was now 1.3 trillion with a T in deficit. And that's where we are today. We're still recovering despite a lot of steps to have full recovery. But you can't fully recover if we're going to continue to subsidize the movement of jobs overseas. The strange and almost perverse policy that's led to taxpayers being called upon because of the policy that's been in place for far too long. The policy where taxpayers are subsidizing the costs associated with the closing of a plant in the United States of America. It's hard to comprehend that, but we shouldn't just lament that, we should end the policy. Instead of that, having taxpayers support strategies to keep jobs here, or support strategies that actually pull jobs back from overseas. So you can't lament the movement of jobs overseas and then just keep voting the way some here are voting against tax policies to keep jobs in America. You can't lament job loss and vote against whether it's the Recovery Act or the HIRE Act or the Small Business Jobs Act. You can't say you're in favor of helping small business and then turn around the next day and vote against $12 billion in tax cuts for small business. You can't say you support small communities and the small banks in America and then vote against a loan fund that will help those very same small banks across America help their small businesses to invest and grow and hire more people and help us recover. And really what tomorrow's vote is not the bill itself. Tomorrow's vote, of course, as everyone knows, just to get over that procedural hurdle to allow us to debate. I think having a debate about ending the offshoring or doing everything we can to end the offshoring of jobs, I think that's worthy of at least one day or a couple of hours of debate. So someone over there might say, well, I'm not going to vote for this bill for this or that reason. Well, they have that right. They can make that argument. But it's pretty hard to say, gosh, I really don't like the fact that we've been shipping jobs overseas and we have tax policies that incentivize that, and we have other policies that we could put in place to change that and to turn that around and to move in the direction of helping taxpayers keep jobs here and pulling jobs back from overseas. You can't say all that and give a big speech on it and then go in and vote the next day and say, you know what, I'm not only going to vote against the bill, I'm going to vote against any debate on this bill. That's a pretty hard argument to make. I'm not sure there's many people that could make it with a straight face and with any degree of integrity. But we'll see what they do. See if they're going to vote against debating arguably one of the most important issues for the American people, stopping jobs from going overseas. So I hope the other side doesn't do what they did with the small business bill, which is to say you support small business, then vote against tax cuts of $12 billion for small business. Say you support community banks, and then vote against community banks getting help to help our small businesses. Maybe tomorrow there'll be a flash of light in the darkness of this political debate, and folks on the other side will just let us debate this for a couple of hours and then maybe even vote the right way to stop jobs from going overseas. But we'll see. We'll see what the morning light brings, Mr. President.